In other news today, New York City school has a new chancellor this afternoon. Just about an hour ago, Mayor de Blasio introduced Richard Carranza, the head of Houston's school system. He will now oversee New York City's 1.1 million public school children. The announcement comes just 4 days after the superintendent of Miami-Dade County accepted and then turned down the job.
Wrong school.
Chancellor, I have in my hand a suit that was filed by 3 white employees of the Department of Education seeking $90 million in damages, charging you with reverse discrimination and with creating a toxic atmosphere for white employees. Your response?
Absolutely not true.
That's it? You're not involved in any kind of racial discrimination?
Absolutely not true. We have the truth on our side. So
you said no, the lie detector test determined that was a lie.
I'm actually shocked that this story hasn't gained much more traction, as it validates what many have feared about woke culture negatively impacting society. This guy, Chancellor Richard Carranza, just cost New York City taxpayers $2.1 million from a racial discrimination lawsuit stemming from 3 former Department of Education employees who were demoted and replaced with less qualified people of color. But let's start from the beginning. According to the suit, in 2018, Mayor de Blasio appointed Richard Carranza as Chancellor of New York City's Department of Education with the help of Ursulina Ramirez, who was in charge of interviewing and selecting high-level staff members for the de Blasio administration. Ursulina herself acknowledged that Mayor de Blasio gave her instructions to hire people that would, quote, reflect the diversity of New York City. Carranza would then go on a crusade against what he deemed as toxic whiteness. This crusade would ultimately lead to the demotion of 3 women, Lois Herrera, Jay Murray, Laura Feju, who then launched a racial discrimination lawsuit against the New York City Department of Education.
Play guitar with the best of them, but Schools Chancellor Richard Carranza's sweeping rearrangement of the deck chairs at the Department of Education is apparently hitting a sour note with some who found themselves without a seat when the music stopped. Sources say at least 4 top DOE executives are working with lawyer Davida Perry, a specialist in employment discrimination, to sue the city, claiming Carranza created an environment hostile to whites. The 4 were reportedly demoted or stripped of duties.
How will you respond if there is a suit filed charging you with discrimination?
we're going to defend it vigorously. There's nothing there. We're going to be able to show we hired the best people for the job through a process that was fair to everyone.
Is race taken into consideration?
Qualifications are taken into consideration.
Since becoming Schools Chancellor, Carranza has revamped the bureaucracy at Tweed DOE headquarters. Among other things, he created a new layer of 9 executive superintendents with a $2.5 million price tag. According to published reports, more than a dozen top dogs, superintendents, and deputies who served under former Chancellor Carmen Farina were demoted or forced to retire. City Councilman Eric Ulrich says the charges raise serious questions.
I think it's reverse discrimination.
The councilman claims it's also the chancellor aiding and abetting the mayor's presidential aspirations so he can cast himself as the champion of diversity. He was smiling and shaking hands, but Schools Chancellor Richard Carranza faced a buzzsaw when he walked into the cafeteria of a Bronx school.
Chancellor, I have in my hand a suit that was filed by 3 white employees of the Department of Education seeking $90 million in damages, charging you with reverse discrimination and with creating a toxic atmosphere for white employees. Your response?
Absolutely not true.
That's it? You're not involved in any kind of racial discrimination?
Absolutely not true. We have the truth on our side, so allegations can be made.
The suit, filed by Lois Herrera, Jay Murray, and Laura Feju, 3 white women, senior administrators who were demoted by Carranza, tells a different tale, that they were left by the wayside in Carranza's push to make sure his top staff reflected the fact that 70% of city students are minority. Carranza cleaned house when he took over. Reportedly more than a dozen top dog superintendents and deputies who served under former Chancellor Carmen Farina were demoted or forced to retire. The suit claims the chancellor made his position clear during a June 27, 2018 speech to upper echelon employees at Tweed DOE headquarters. If you draw a paycheck from DOE, you will either get on board with his equity platform or leave, he is charged with saying.
Did you say that, and what did you mean?
Did not say that. absolutely did not say that. I give pep talks to the employees of the DOE all the time.
I wanted to dig into exactly what Carranza brought to the department and show you what the employees were shown as part of this woke crusade. The New York Post managed to obtain a slide from one of these anti-bias training sessions, and it features a list of aspects that supports what is referred to as white supremacy culture. This material actually comes from a larger piece of literature called Dismantling Racism, a workbook for social change groups by Kenneth Jones and Tima Okun. I'm going to read off a few of these verbatim just so you understand what is being fed to the staff as a problem. Objectivity. This can lead to the belief that there's an ultimate truth and that alternative viewpoints or emotions are bad. It's even inherent in the belief that there is such a thing as being objective. Worship of the written word. This idea prioritizes documentation and writing skills rather than the ability to relate to others. It also leads to teaching that there's only one right way to do something, either or thinking, seeing things in terms of good or bad, right or wrong, black or white. This results in trying to simplify complex things. For example, believing that poverty is simply a result of lack of education. The amount of irony from this nonsense is staggering. You want to preach against black or white thinking, all while telling people to just accept this junk without question. But let me not mince words. This type of approach is nonsensical if you don't understand the underlying goal. It's a scam. People, all people, have some degree of prejudice, either conscious or unconscious. Doesn't matter if they come from upper crust or the lowest dregs of society. This scam is only designed to instill a sense of original sin for the clever opportunists to profit from. If you don't believe me, just check out the consultants Carranza hired for almost $750,000 to help implement his anti-white crusade. Dr. Darnisa Armonte and Glenn Singleton.
My name is Dr. Darnisa Armonte, CEO and founder of the Disruptive Equity Education Project, or DEEP. Here at DEEP, we're a racial equity consulting firm that focuses on customizing an experience for individuals, community leaders, and school systems in the kindergarten through 12th grade space, where we talk about bias, stereotype threat, individual purpose in working for equity and advocating for communities, and where we do some planning with teams on how do you even operationalize missions and visions that are focused on equity and diversity and inclusion.
Also, we go to a thinking spot. Don't think. Keep yourself from deeply thinking. Go to the feeling spot. Go to the believing spot. Back to the feeling spot. Back to the believing spot. And hold yourself in that internal space rather than react externally. That is, don't stroll the history. Don't go way back into the past, because there is nothing we can do about that. But what you can do is just think about your feelings connected to the fact that if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon.
I'm not surprised in the least that a judge would find Carranza guilty of racial discrimination against all three women. Lois Herrera, a Harvard-educated woman who had been with the Department of Education since 1986, was told that she was part of the problem by a Carranza-appointed deputy chancellor and then demoted 3 levels to the same group that she used to lead. The lawsuit claims that her replacement, a black man named Mark Rampersant, was demonstrably underqualified for the role, yet somehow obtained the position despite no position being posted. Jay Murray, a social worker who held the position of executive director of the Office of Counseling Support and Programs, was replaced by Jillian Smith, a black woman who, you guessed it, had no experience as a counselor nor any license as a social worker. Laura Feju has a doctorate degree in educational leadership and was the senior supervising superintendent, but was demoted and replaced by a black woman named Cheryl Watson Harris, who, again, did not have the necessary licensure for the role. I'm sure by now you see a pattern. What happened was that the Chancellor Richard Carranza had appointed LaShawn Robinson as his DEI deputy, and she, with Carranza's blessing, essentially handpicked whoever she wanted for these top-level roles in the department and relegated the previous incumbents to mundane tasks. Here's Robinson addressing Assemblywoman Enos Dickens about a curriculum change at the New York City schools to prepare for college.
Could share some of that.
Thank you, Chancellor and Assembly Member. Foundational to this approach, because I noted that earlier you shared that Some advisors are discouraging students in certain areas, and some children are not being taught. Foundational to our approach to advance equity is to really address the biases that show up within all of us. If you're breathing, you have biases. So what we're doing is we're working with teachers and school leaders and other members of school communities across the system to really develop a sense of awareness, to understand the biases that we all have and how they show up in school communities and classrooms, and most importantly, how they impact the children in our schools.
After all that, Judge Mary Kay Viskosil found that Chancellor Carranza had lied about race not being a factor when implementing his changes, even though he and de Blasio affirmed under oath that diversity and equity was a priority. She is also quoted as saying the following: "Whether de Blasio and Carranza set a policy at the Department of Education of using race as a determinant factor in hiring, which policy Carranza personally acted on with respect to Feju and Robinson, followed with respect to Herrera and Murray, is a factual dispute that turns in part on witness credibility. There is evidence in the record to permit the inference that de Blasio and Carranza, as final policymakers, were the moving force behind race-based demotions that violated the plaintiff's right under the Equal Protection Clause." So there we have it. When people say go woke, go broke, it's real. And the taxpayers of New York City may eventually comprehend this notion. Until then, sit idly by, drink the Kool-Aid, and don't ask questions, because that's how you beat racism. I'm the Commentary King, and I'll see you around.